The Science-Based Targets Initiative is developing the NetZero standard to show companies how they can align their net zero climate targets with what the science says is necessary to stay within 1.5 degrees of warming. It's important for companies to set science-based net zero targets to ensure that they're doing the right thing for us to be able to hit the global goal of achieving net zero by mid-century. There's been a huge uprising in companies setting net zero targets over the last few years, but what we've noticed at the Science-Based Targets Initiative is that companies are setting net zero targets looking in a whole variety of different ways. So there's differences between the scopes, the boundaries, and the way that they're planning to achieve these targets. So really, we set out to develop the net zero standard to give companies more clarity around what is needed in terms of the science so that they can set net zero targets that they are confident in. We know that a huge proportion of the world's emissions come from companies. So if we're able to develop a standard that shows companies how to align with science to help us achieve the global goal of net zero, then that should bring us much more close towards that goal. The Science-Based Targets Initiative's net zero standard essentially asks companies to do 4 things. So the first thing is to set a near-term science-based target, which is essentially a 5 to 10 year science-based target that shows companies how much they need to reduce emissions to be in line with 1.5C global warming. The second thing that it asks companies to do is to set a long-term science-based target. This essentially shows companies how much they need to reduce their emissions to be in line with global net zero scenarios. Once the company reaches that long-term science-based target, then the third ask comes in, and that is for companies to then neutralize any remaining emissions at that point with carbon removals or carbon sinks. Finally, the fourth point is that in the transition to net zero, we also ask companies to invest or take action outside of their science-based targets to help mitigate climate change elsewhere. Researchers have explored a wide range of scenarios that limit warming to 1.5C, and generally speaking, the lower the level of emission reductions, the higher the need to remove carbon at a later date to stabilise temperatures. And of course, while some carbon removal is necessary, expanding these technologies at a large scale could have potential adverse effects on the environment and other sustainable development goals. Because of this, the Science-Based Targets Initiative has focused on mitigation pathways that limit warming to 1.5C with limited reliance on carbon removals at scale. Under the net zero standard, we expect that most companies will reduce their emissions between 90 and 95% by 2050 at the latest. Companies should embrace the net zero standards to be confident that the actions that they're taking in setting net zero targets are in line with the latest climate science.